Well, good afternoon. My name is Stephanie Ford. I'm the creative director here at North Star. We want to welcome you to Lunch with a Leader. This is our opportunity once a month to gather together and take a look at the lives of some people in Scripture and figure out if we based our lives on the leadership that they showed, what would it look like for us? And Mike's going to be coming up in a few minutes to kick us off in this new year. We know many of you are watching from conference rooms. Some of you may be watching from your home office. We've got some of our North Star staff gathered here in the room today watching with us as well. And today, as we go through the day, we would love for you to let us know where you're watching from, who you're watching with. You can snap a picture, post it in the comments, let our chat host know. We would love to connect with you and know where you're watching from. Well, I know many of you, as the year has gotten started, have thought about what is going to be my goal for the year? What is my word for the year? And before we get started today, I'd love for you to consider around your groups or, again, in your home office, maybe if you're by yourself, what is your biggest prayer as you begin this new year? So we're going to give you about a minute to talk about that, and then Mike will be up to get us started. Thanks again for being with us today.
Well, hey, everybody. It is so good to see you. Welcome to Lunch with a Leader 2021. Thank you for joining again with us in this journey. I think it is going to be a great year. You know, we've spent about a year and a half in the life of David. We spent a year and a half in the life of Moses, and we couldn't leave Moses without going to the young man that followed Moses in his journey named Joshua. You probably know more about David and Moses than you do Joshua, but I think you're going to find out all through the years, Joshua was being prepared for the moment that he began to lead. So hopefully you've got your outlines printed and you've got everything printed off. Right at the top, I want you to write down this little thought. God was preparing Joshua before Joshua knew he was being prepared. You know, sitting in this room today are a lot of our staff. Some are in their 20s and they're at that beginning stage. A lot of times they're doing a role, but really God is using that role to prepare them for something they don't even know is coming. What we're going to find as we walk in this journey today, Joshua didn't just show up when Moses died. I think it's so easy to read, you know, we finished the life of Moses and it said, and Moses died. And we know that Joshua then gets tapped by God to lead the children. And we think, okay, well, God just went and found the next guy. No. God had been preparing Joshua for years to be that guy. Long before we're on the stage, God is preparing us behind the scenes to get us ready for what he wants to do. So I want you to look with me. These are some great stories that set up the life of Joshua that I think help us in where we are, because for many years, Joshua wasn't the leader. You may be in a situation in the environment you're in the city government or in the police force or in the school system or on the church staff where you're not in charge. And what do you do in leadership when you're not in charge? I think Joshua paints a great picture. Numbers 13, verses 1 through 3. The Lord now said to Moses, send out men to explore the land of Canaan, the land I'm going to give to the Israelites. Send one leader from each of the 12 ancestral tribes. So Moses did as the Lord commanded him. He sent out 12 men, all tribal leaders of Israel, from their camp in the wilderness of Paran. All right, so let's set up the story real quick. So the children have been brought out of slavery, right? Moses has taken them across the Red Sea. They've been brought out and they're going to the promised land that God, I want you to hear was the key, God was giving it to them. It wasn't something they earned. It wasn't something they were going to deserve. God was going to give it to them. But that's where things got in trouble. Numbers 13. So he sends the 12 out. Y'all do know when you get a group of people together, it can always go sideways, right? So it goes sideways really quick. Verse 25, after exploring the land for 40 days, I want you to underline 40 days there in your outline. Why is that significant? Significance, anytime the number 40 is used, it means testing. So anytime 40 is used, it's a time of testing that you're going to go through. The men returned after 40 days to Moses, to Aaron, and the whole community of Israel at Kadesh in the wilderness of Paran. They reported to the whole community what they had seen, and they showed them the fruit they had taken from the land. So they're like, look at all the stuff we brought back. Verse 27, this was their report to Moses. We entered the land you sent us to explore, and it was indeed a bountiful country, a land flowing with milk and honey. And here's the kind of fruit it produces. So it's everything. While they're in slavery, they dreamed that a promise, quote unquote, a promised land would be. But the people living there, they're powerful. Their towns are large. They're fortified. We even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak. So they're all familiar with giants from Goliath, right? And that whole tribe that he came from. The Amalekites live in the edge of the Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites. They all live in the hill country. The Canaanites live along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, along the Jordan Valley. Verse 30, but Caleb and Joshua were always knitted together. But Caleb tried to quiet the people as they stood before Moses. Let's go at once to take the land. We can certainly conquer it. So did you see what happened? If you lead people, right? If you lead ministries for the people in this room, if you lead organizations, you lead coaching staffs. I know a lot of our college coaches are watching right now with your coaching staff. If you lead a team of people, you don't have to search hard to find negativity, right? So they originally say, I think we can do it, but. Now here's the hard part for Moses. Moses has got to determine what and who he's going to listen to. We've seen the goods, but now we hear the opposition and what we're up against and what we're going to have to face. The Amalekites and all the people, they're bigger, they're stronger, they're more powerful. But Caleb tries to quiet the people. Let's go at once. We can do it. We can conquer it. And if you were all in the room today, I would ask you this question. What did it say earlier that God was giving them this land? Well, that's already forgotten now. God's promises, once facing obstacles, are quickly forgotten. Verse 31, but the other men who had explored the land with him disagreed. They disagreed with Caleb. We can't go up against them. They are stronger than we are. So they spread the bad report about the land among the Israelites. The land we traveled through and explored will devour anyone who goes to live there. All the people we saw there, I want you to underline this next phrase, were huge. Huge. We even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak. Next to them, this is all you need to know, we felt like grasshoppers. And that's what they thought too. Now, I want you to think about this. Did they really think they looked like grasshoppers, or did the people just think they thought they looked like grasshoppers? Well, I think we know the answer to that. And 10 people decided an issue for millions. 10 people. 2, Joshua and Caleb said, we can do it. 10 go, we can't. Numbers 14. 2 of the men who had explored the land, Joshua son of Nun and Caleb the son of you see his name, said to all the people of Israel, the land we traveled through and explored is a wonderful land. And if the Lord is pleased with us, he will bring us safely into that land and give it to us. It is a rich land flowing with milk and honey. Do not rebel against the Lord and don't be afraid of the people of the land. They're only helpless to pray to us. They have no protection. The Lord is with us. Don't be afraid of them. Now here's the crazy part. But yet they were afraid. And because of that choice, now I want you to think about this. Because of that choice, this group of people, these 40, right? This 40 days, these 12 that went and saw, the 10 that reported the bad report, because of that, they now got tested for 40, not 40 days, but for 40 years. They wandered in the wilderness because Moses listened to the wrong people. That's powerful. Now, let's talk about Joshua. Joshua and Caleb said they could do it. So it's one thing to be a leader in waiting. Now, did Joshua know at this time he was going to be the next guy? I don't think so. But what we learn is Joshua was the next guy. So for 40 years, Joshua could have been the one that was right. How easy would it have been for Joshua in this organization of people to go, I'm one of the guys that said we could do it, man. Moses is a clown. He should have listened to me. Why did he not listen to me? You never read that from Joshua. Joshua, before he became a great leader, and I want you to write this down, became a great follower. Before Joshua became a great leader, Joshua was a great follower. What he could have done to turn people, Joshua must have done to bring them together. In fact, when the children of Israel finally get across and they get into the promised land, Joshua and Caleb are the only 2 of the 12 that made it. Isn't that amazing? The other 10 died off. There were generations that died off. What do we know about Joshua before he assumed the title as God's leader? So here's what I don't know. I wish you were all sitting in the room because I know who you are and I know your titles. I don't know where you are. I don't know what you're watching from this morning or where you're watching from this morning. But each of us have a title, right? No matter the title, we can be God's leader wherever we're put. And I think it's a great lesson for us. What do we learn from Joshua? Number 1, Joshua had a great vision for Israel. This is interesting. Before Joshua became the deliverer from the wilderness to the promised land, Joshua already had a great vision. He already saw what it could be. Sometimes when we're within organizations, we have a vision of what it could be. The hard part is delivering that vision to the people that are in charge. If you're not in charge, delivering it to the people in charge and sharing that vision with them. That's what Joshua did. The land we traveled through and explored is a wonderful land, and it's a rich land flowing with milk and honey. He knew what the people needed, but yet what he shared was not accepted. So I remember years ago in my first ministry, I've only had 2 ministry jobs in my 31 years of doing this, almost 30 years of doing this. But I remember calling a buddy. I was really frustrated about some things that were going on. I called a friend of mine, and I was expressing, I thought the vision of the church should be this, and the vision of the church, I don't think there was a vision of the church. But anyways, it was over here doing its own thing, and my friend asked me a question. He said, "Are you in charge?" And I said, "No." He said, "Have you shared your thoughts?" I said, "Yes." Then he said, "The problem isn't them, then the problem can become you and what you do to handle how you're feeling." I can't imagine. Now that was probably, I was at that church 5.5 years. That was probably 4 years in. For a year and a half, I had to sit on that. Joshua had to sit on it for 40 years. Can you imagine? Can you imagine knowing what could have been? Now, you're not just experiencing some dark times, you're experiencing a true wilderness journey. You're eating manna. Our staff is in here, thanks to Andy Duncan, his amazing team at Chick-fil-A. They're all eating Chick-fil-A right now. Can you imagine eating manna? You know, manna means what is it, right? You imagine eating that and that's going to sustain you, and all of it's because Moses listened to the wrong people. But here's what we learn. Vision always starts with something that needs to change. And I want you to write that down. Vision always starts with something that needs to change. So many times, even within an organization, God's going to give you a vision. God's going to give you a vision. Your challenge is sharing that vision up, right? Here's the only way never to share that vision. If you're within an organization, you never broadcast that vision out to people around you or people down from you. That's how you destroy an organization, right? If I take the vision that God's given me and I take it to the people that it needs to go to, and they say, listen, I think that's great, but it's not right now, then I've got a choice. What do I do with it? God laid it on your heart for a reason. Maybe he's getting you ready for what's next. We learned long before he became the leader, Joshua got a vision. And you never can be a leader without a vision. So many times within a healthy organization, you have vision for your part of the organization, which is great. But this vision Joshua got was for the group. It was for the people. Think about this. The people, the other 10, what did they see? They saw big people, big problems, and they felt like grasshoppers. Joshua and Caleb goes, listen, God's already given it to us. Let's go take it. They had a vision. Look at what Andy Stanley said. Vision is a clear mental picture of what should be, fueled by the conviction that it should be. So not only is it a clear mental picture, you're fueled with a conviction, this is the way it should be. And that was the life for Joshua. Number 2 lesson we learned from Joshua. Joshua had an obedient heart towards God. So I want to say this, and I want it to sound right. Nothing will destroy your heart more than ambitions that get awry. That can destroy you. And you can start off in an organization and it's fun and it's good, but all of a sudden we could be in the promised land right now, and we're not in the promised land. And boy, it takes seat in your heart and mind, right? And it begins to root. We have got as followers to have an obedient heart towards the Lord. Look at what it says in Numbers 14. Do not rebel against the Lord. Joshua understood in verses 3 and 4, people are blaming God for the situation and they're wanting to pick a new leader besides Moses. They fail to admit their unbelief is what caused them. They're pinning this whole thing, not on the 10. They're pinning it all on Moses. And Joshua says, don't rebel against the Lord. I want you to write this little thought down. It is a daily act. It is a daily act. Now, we all understand within every part of the place we're in, you are a leader, right? You just may not have the title of being the ultimate in charge, but you're a leader in your department, or you're a leader in your team, or whatever it is, the structure of your organization. All of us as leaders have got to keep an obedient heart towards the Lord. Look at what Warren Wiersbe said. Those who rebel against God's will are denying his wisdom, questioning his love, and tempting the Lord to discipline them. In our February, I think it's February 22nd, it's our next Lunch with a Leader. When we gather together, we're going to find Joshua taking the mantle of leadership when God taps him on the shoulder and says, Joshua, you're the guy, which is naturally where we should have started January. I don't think you can start that without understanding Joshua was a leader long before he got the title of being a leader. Jim Collins, in his book, Good to Great, talks about a level 5 leader. Typically, a level 5 leader doesn't just assume the position. They've been assimilated along the way, and they are a level 5. They're the ultimate leader because they've been through the organization, right? They understand it. When Joshua began to lead, you know what he understood? He knew what it was like to be a follower. He knew what it was like to need more direction. He knew what it was like. He hadn't forgotten what he learned in those 40 years. And number 3, Joshua had a confident faith in God. He didn't allow the misstep to shake his faith. Look at what it says in Numbers 14. The land we traveled through and explored is a wonderful land, and the Lord is pleased with us, and he will bring us safely into the land and will give it to us. Don't be afraid of the people. They're only helpless prey to us. They have no protection, but the Lord is with us. Don't be afraid of them. Basically what Joshua was saying was, if God's on our side, we got this thing. If God's got us, we got it. That confident faith in the Lord. Tim Keller says this: if you say, I believed in God, I trusted God, and he didn't come through, you only trusted God to meet your agenda. Because I think sometimes if the come through is not what we thought it was, then we think we're not being all that we were created to be. So I want you to write this little thought down. Spiritual leadership is about accomplishing God's agenda for your life. So you're tuning in today, you're listening today because you go, I don't want to just be a leader. I don't want to just be a police chief or a principal or an assistant principal or an athletic director or a children's minister. I don't want to just do that. I don't want to just be a college baseball coach. I want to be God's person doing that role, okay? So spiritual leadership is about accomplishing God's agenda for our lives. But spiritual leadership also is about getting the people you lead onto God's agenda. Joshua understood, my job isn't to just be the guy. My job is to get people onto God's agenda. So here's what none of us know. None of us know what's in our future. None of us know what is to be coming in our lives. But we know this, we know that God does. So the more confident we are in him, the more confident we are to assume the things that he has in store for us. So around your conference table, around your tables here in this room, maybe if you're watching from your home office, maybe it's a great time to brainstorm a little bit. I want you to ask yourself this question: what changes about us when we're confident in our faith? What changes about us as leaders when we're confident in our faith? I want you to take a couple minutes. There's going to be a slide come up, and then we're going to bring up some really good friends today, and we're going to bring this plane down, and we're going to apply it to where we all lead. So take a second, and we'll be back here in 3 minutes and 30 seconds. I hope you had some great discussions. Boy, those would be great to share in the chat feature and share some of the things you talked about around your tables today. Well, really, I was the prelude to the best part of Lunch with a Leader. Today, we've got two of my favorite Lunch with a Leader friends and friends in life. Kevin Scott, who is the president and runs Addo, phenomenal communicator, travels the country. Dr. George Manners, who was a college dean, a business leader for many, many years, and a thought leader today, and just always brings out so many great thoughts. And so I invited him in here today because I live in the church arena. I dabble in other things, but I live in the church arena. These guys live in the world most of you work in. So I wanted to bring home some real life application. And Kevin, you'd sent me a note about people listening to the majority and it being a mistake. And I think it's easy in leadership to listen to the majority. You want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think as a leader, you're often looking for approval from others. You want to know what they're thinking, how it's feeling, but there's so many times where you can see that the majority is wrong. I love as you were going through Joshua's story, Joshua and Caleb were outnumbered. 10 guys out of 12 said they should not take the land, and that was a scenario where the majority was wrong. And we were talking earlier about other instances where people either allowed or did not allow a wrong majority to prevail. Maybe one example of each. So when you look back and study history and you see the Challenger explosion, that was an example where there were some scientists there from NASA that they didn't think this was a good idea. They had, the story goes, they had rolled out and rolled back in the Challenger space shuttle multiple times. I think it cost millions of dollars each time they rolled it out. And finally, the majority, some strong military folks, encouraged them to go ahead and launch the shuttle, even though they weren't really confident in it. And that majority spoke. And we know that the Challenger space shuttle exploded. So it was an instance where the majority was wrong, but they bullied some folks into making a decision. We're going to be talking about Chick-fil-A a little bit today. I'm excited for what Dr. Manners is going to share. But I love this story. So many people who are familiar with Chick-fil-A are also familiar with WinShape. And WinShape almost never was, because Truett Cathy went up to Barry. They were trying to liquidate this land that was costing them $2 million a year. Truett came back with a burden and a vision in his heart of what God could do at WinShape, what's now WinShape. And the executive committee at Chick-fil-A didn't think it was a good idea. In fact, they heavily discouraged him from pursuing it. And Truett, being a very humble leader, somebody who valued those opinions, but that was an instance where he knew in his heart what God had called him to do, and he basically said, "Thank you for your advice, we're going to do it anyway." And so many millions of lives have now been impacted because of that instance. It helped that he was in charge, but where he was able to lead even when the majority of people said he should do something different. I know it's sometimes more difficult when you're not in a position where you're in charge.
Yeah. And you brought a great book today. And one of the things I think it tied in really well with where we went with Joshua's life. You mind sharing a little bit about that, Dr. Manners?
Yeah, if I mention the name Jimmy Collins, I doubt many of you know who he is. He was the original and long-term non-family president of Chick-fil-A. And he wrote a book entitled Creative Followership. And the subtitle is In the Shadow of Greatness, meaning, of course, Truett. But this whole book is about how to be a leader follower. And it begins with the recognition that you choose your boss. You control your destiny. If you have a bad boss in a bad company, get out of there. If you have a bad boss in a good company, Hang in there. Bosses come and go. If you find, to use Brian Dodd's words last time, if you find a great leader who is also a good person, serve them. How do you serve them? Well, you begin by doing what they don't like to do. You follow that up by doing what they are bad at. It's a little difficult if they don't realize they're bad at it, but that's another topic. And finally, you serve them by never publicly disagreeing with them until you've done it one-on-one.
Why is that hard to do, that publicly disagree? Let's camp on that for a second. Why is that hard to do when you feel like God has laid something on your heart that would make the organization better? What would y'all say? I'll let either of you jump in on that.
Yeah, well, I think number one is if God's given you a vision, if he's given you, if he's given us brains, he's helped us think about things. When you see something that doesn't feel like it's right, you believe that it's your obligation to speak up about it. But it's interesting, until I was sitting right here listening to you share earlier, I didn't think about the fact that Joshua and Caleb disagreed, but they never threw Moses under the bus. I mean, that would have been, you almost think at some point when things are going wrong, they would want to come back and say, hey, remember 10 years ago when we said we should have gone in there? But they never did that. And I think if you're not going to do that, if you're going to respect that leader, you've got to value the mission and the organization more than you value your own ego. And it's really clear that Joshua did that.
Well, and that's why when you drive through a little town, I was in a little town the other day, and you see a First Baptist and a Second Baptist and a Third Baptist. Those are all the people that kept disagreeing, right? And they kept going and starting new churches because it would have been really easy. Joshua and Caleb knew how to get back to the promised land. And they could have done their own expedition, but they never did. Why do you think it's so hard, Dr. Manners? And you've consulted and worked with so many organizations through the years. What would you say?
Well, let's take a scenario. This is a hypothetical scenario. Chick-fil-A has been growing in malls. Jimmy Collins says, we can scale better than this. Truett just doesn't have the vision. What are you going to do? You're going to build your case to Truett. Don't go public until Truett has heard it. And don't distort information like the Big Ten did. Of all those giants out there, they're going to kill us. That's the worst thing you could do. Have your vision, sell it. Don't stop selling it.
That's right. How do you lead when you're not in charge? So you don't have the title, right? Ultimate title. How do you still lead properly when you aren't in charge? Joshua did it for, we know, 40 years. At least he did that. How do you do that? What would y'all say? What are some practical things that people can do to help them in that arena?
Yeah, I'll throw in two, and then I'll defer to Dr. Manners. I told you I didn't want to do this with him again. This is the ultimate knowledge over here. Two things. One, I think one of the intangibles of leadership that we don't talk about a lot, and I would say of followership as well, is grit. Having the willingness to hang in there even when it's tough. And I think if you're going to lead when you're not in charge, the decisions are going to come maybe slower than you'd like them to. The leadership may come not as quickly. So being able to hang in there. And then I think the other thing is changing your perspective on the problems you're dealing with. So we talk about perspective, how we view things changes how we do things. You got to change your perspective on the problem. Little plug here. I was listening to the Lunch with a Leader podcast this morning with Richard Blackaby, and I loved it. He said, problems are a leader's job security. That was so amazing to think about. What the problems I'm dealing with when I'm not in charge, to me, that's reinforcement that there's something that I'm needed to do within this organization that I can contribute. And so I think just changing the way you view those problems is a huge step.
That's good.
First time you and I did this program together, I talked about choices, and the first choice is your attitude. If you have visions and you are the follower, choose your attitude. Choose your optimism. To use Colin Powell's phrase, optimism is a force multiplier. Time for just a short poem. If you think you're beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you'd like to win but think you can't, it's almost a cinch. You won't. If you think you'll lose, you've lost. For out in the world you'll find success begins with the follower's will. It's all in the state of mind. For many a race is lost before even a step is run, and many a faint heart fails before even his work's begun. Think big and your deeds will grow. Think small and you'll fall behind. Think that you can and you will. It's all in the state of mind. If you think you're outcast, you are. You have to think high to rise. You have to believe in yourself before you'll ever win a prize. Life's battles don't always go to the stronger and faster man, because sooner or later, the man who wins is the fellow who thinks he can.
Why didn't you do that? That's unbelievable.
I'm never doing this
you got
again.
A notepad
Don't invite me.
You don't even look at anything. Unbelievable, Kevin.
Thanks a lot.
I expect more next time. I really do. I have something, but I don't want to use 2 poems in one sitting. I think that would be a little much.
Isn't that beautiful, folks?
It is.
So good.
So good. Have you ever had a time, Dr. Manners, you've served within an organization where you felt that pressure of being the one not in charge, but yet struggling? How'd you get through that time?
I got some outside help. My CEO wanted to build the world's greatest pulp mill in the Michigan Upper Peninsula. And pulp prices were at an all-time high. It was unsustainably high. And I had to try and talk him out of it. And I couldn't talk him out of it. I didn't distort information. I kept pushing. Luckily, environmentalists and the locals in the Upper Peninsula stopped it. And 1 year later, pulp prices were down 70%. We would have not been in chapter 11. We would have been in chapter 7. Would have been done for. And I couldn't get through.
Kevin, you're in and out of organizations all the time working with them. The strongest organizations don't only have the strongest leaders, they have the strongest teams, which are made up of the Joshuas in there. How quickly, as a consultant, you walk in all the time doing this, can you pick up on the health of the followers, and I say the ones not with the title, but the Joshuas in the crowd? How quickly can you pick up on that when you walk in a room?
Yeah, I think it's really fast, but it's interesting because I love what you were talking about, Dr. Manners, about giving feedback or speaking up in private. A lot of that hinges on whether the leader creates the opportunity for them to speak up. Right. And most of it doesn't matter if we're doing training or we're rolling out a new culture, philosophy, or any of that, it usually starts with a meeting with the leadership team. And if the leader has empowered other people to speak up freely, it's a totally different conversation than where they're looking afraid of what they might say each time. And so, and I think it goes back to, do you have a good boss or not? That doesn't mean that that leader isn't ultimately going to make the decision, but the leaders that value input, those organizations have clearer, stronger cultures. They're organizations where people believe the best in each other, they want the best for each other, and they expect the best from each other. And when they believe in each other, want for each other, and expect from each other, they'll value feedback, but they'll also hold people accountable in a totally different way.
It's really, and you think about Joshua. Richard Blackaby, in fact, brought it up in the podcast. He talked about Joshua. Joshua is one of the only leaders. You know, if you read Moses' life, that people were mad at him all the time, and you never read that about Joshua. You never hear that about Joshua. Joshua assumes control reluctantly, I might add. We'll learn next time. Very reluctant, but yet God uses him in some phenomenal ways. Here's what I want you to remember today. God isn't wasting your time, and he is not wasting your experiences. No matter what you're going through, no matter the season that you're in, it may be the season, your promised land season. That's awesome. I hope it is. But it may be that wilderness season. You may be in that season of wilderness, and you're like, man, I'm in a job, but I really can't leave. I can't do. Don't think God's forgotten you. When Joshua and Caleb came back and said we can, and the 10 said we can't, and 40 years they now had to live in this, Joshua was being prepared for the moment that God tapped him on the shoulder. Today, our challenge to you is God's got a plan for you. God's got a plan for your leadership. What you do with that plan is really, really up to you. I'm so thankful to have these incredible guys here. We're so excited to get you back in the room. When it's safe, we're going to begin to gather everybody out. We don't want everybody in our community to be sick at one time and everybody blame me. All right. And so that's not, I don't need that kind of publicity. All right. And so we will get everybody back together when it is safe. But until then, we'll stay virtual. February the 22nd, Monday the 22nd is our next gathering. We will begin another story, another chapter in Joshua's life. You're like, Mike, I would love to read ahead. It's called Joshua, all right? It's in the Bible. It's a whole book on it. And so you can read ahead, then you don't even have to come. It'll be great. But thank you, Dr. Manners. Thank you, Kevin. You guys are amazing.
We're honored to be asked.
Well, we are honored to have you here. And thanks to our awesome North Star staff for being in here today. I can't wait to see you again next time. I'll see you in February on the 22nd at noon.